Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Kyle Henderson of BamaInsider.com. We got a special guest today. We got Matt Miller in from the DraftScout.com. We're going to be talking about potential landing spots. We're going to be talking about a bunch of Alabama football players entering the 2021 draft. Matt, how you doing? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me. And buckle up, right? We got a lot of Alabama players to talk about.
Yeah, it's like, every single year, Alabama, what they do, not only on the field, not only on recruiting, but also when the NFL draft comes around, it's really incredible to see what Nick Saban's able to do from recruiting on the field to the NFL. This year, no different. There's a ton of guys to kind of go through. And I wanted to actually lead off the show. We'll just dive right into it, talking about DeVonta Smith, because I think when you look at DeVonta Smith and all the great things that he did at Alabama, it's starting to, I don't know if he's starting to lose a little bit of momentum in the draft. I mean, all we've been talking about recently is Mac Jones. And I kind of wanted to get your opinion. Like, do you feel that him not participating in the Senior Bowl, something as minuscule as the height and weight, him coming off an index finger injury, do you think that could somehow, put him down in the draft a little bit? What's your kind of overall take as we start the show off talking about DeVonta Smith?
Yeah, so I think, with the draft, it's a long process and it's kind of a confusing process because a lot of it happens behind closed doors, especially this year with no NFL combine because of COVID-19. So I think that a lot of times storylines are almost not invented, but, somewhat overhyped. There's a little bit of a players aren't stocks. There's not always that up and down. That's the term we use, though, right? Is player stock is up or down.
Mm-hmm.
I think with DeVonta Smith, he is who he is, and he had a tremendous year. Heisman Trophy winner. You guys know better than anybody. An amazing year. So I think that there's a lot to love about him. There are concerns. I don't think the finger injury is a big concern. Had that not been the national championship game, they probably would have popped it in place. He would have gone right back in, and you would have finished this thing out. Not participating in the Senior Bowl to me was a smart move. As you mentioned, you don't go and weigh in. It's okay. The biggest knock on Smith is that he's not a very big guy. You're coming off a long season. You've probably lost some weight. You want to have time to bulk up a little bit before your pro day, before the combine. That's understandable. I don't think that's going to raise any red flags for anyone as a guy, really tries to train professionally for the first time in his life. But I do think that what we're seeing happen, Kyle, is that people are remembering that Jamar Chase was really, really good in 2019 before he opted out of the 2020 season. So I think what we're seeing is more of a correction almost, where during the season, we were seeing DeVonta play. We weren't seeing Jamar Chase play. We weren't seeing Jaylen Waddle play because of injury. So DeVonta drives the conversation because he's what you're seeing on Saturdays.
Sure.
And he's winning a Heisman Trophy and he's dominating statistically. So it's, oh my God, like this guy's it. He's wide receiver one. People are out there saying the Jets should take him at number 2, when the reality is the process really starts about January 1st. And you go back and look at that tape, but you have to remember who Waddle was, when healthy. You have to remember who Chase was when he was on the field, and put DeVonta in the context of that. Last year, if we had done this interview February 10th last year, February 9th last year, I would have told you that Jerry Jeudy was going to be the number 1 receiver off the board, and there was no question about it. And he ended up being the number 2 receiver, and he lasted till pick 15. So just like last year, where you have this great player everybody thinks is going to go first, what teams actually need really drives that more than generalized player value. So I don't think that DeVonta's stock is necessarily dropping. I think it's just that people are starting to catch up to where his stock truly lives.
Here with Matt Miller of the DraftScout.com. You can check out his website. Leading up to the NFL draft, we're talking about a variety of Alabama football players that are entering the 2021 draft. Actually turning the page kind of to another wide receiver, and that's Jaylen Waddle. Jaylen Waddle is a guy, only 28 receptions, 591 yards with 4 touchdowns this last season, had an ankle injury, came back in the national championship, thought it was a gritty performance just to even come in, has elite speed. Like you said, before even the season started, look, DeVonta Smith coming back and Henry Ruggs leaving, Jerry Jeudy leaving, DeVonta Smith returning, but all eyes were really on Jaylen Waddle. I mean, this is a guy who has an elite level speed. He's a game changer on every single play. I mean, Alabama always has home run hitters, but this guy, is a whole nother breed. What's kind of the latest pulse on Jaylen Waddle declaring early for the NFL, coming off the ankle injury? I don't feel that that's probably going to be too big of an issue, but where do you see him? Is he potentially the second wide receiver off the board? Is he a top 10 guy? Let's dive into Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, I think Jaylen is spectacular, and we really haven't seen even everything that he brings to the table yet. I think that's the exciting part of it. I would not be shocked if April 29th he's the first receiver drafted, just like Henry Ruggs being the first receiver drafted last year, because I do think, despite what happened in the Super Bowl, everyone wants that big play yak wide receiver. They want that Tyreek Hill version guy who can stretch the field. That's Jaylen Waddle. And like you said, the stats weren't amazing. But last year, you're sharing the field with 4 first rounders at wide receiver. This year, you get banged up with the ankle injury. So I do think that when it's all said and done, it wouldn't be a gigantic surprise if the Miami Dolphins said, we got DeVonta Parker, who's a possession guy. We got a couple other big guys. Let's go for the home run hitter, somebody who can stretch the field and go with Jaylen Waddle. The same for a team like the Philadelphia Eagles or the Detroit Lions. So I think it's a safe to say that he's a lock as a top 10 pick as the draft order stands right now. If there's a run on quarterbacks, that could change things a little bit. But I think Jaylen's great, and it's almost unfair to talk about Jamar Chase, DeVonta Smith, and Jaylen Waddle in the same conversation because they're all three so different, right? It's like if that was your wide receiver core, you'd be so happy. But they're all so different in terms of what they bring to the table. I think they're all electric, and it's unfortunate if you talk about liking one, people assume you don't like the others. When I think all three are great, and if you have a fan of an NFL team and you need a wide receiver and you get any of these three guys, like, you're in great shape. You're in a really good spot. It is similar in that way to last year, where there were 3 receivers who were top 20 picks. All 3 were really talented, very different in what they brought to the table. So I think this year is pretty close to that with these big 3 at the top.
With Matt Miller, talking about potential landing spots, what he likes. He's from the draftscout.com. Definitely check him out. Matt, what's your Twitter on social media?
Yeah, it's at NFL Draft Scout, really everywhere on social media. And the website would be NFLDraftScout.com, but the NFL gets pretty picky about you monetizing those 3 letters. So got to go the instead of NFL.
All right. Here we go. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, there had to be a quarterback to distribute the football, obviously. And when Tua Tagovailoa left Alabama, I think there was some concerns about the quarterback position. I think, kind of rewinding to a couple years ago, I don't think that people were too high on Mac Jones, to be honest. I mean, I think there was kind of a crowd that knew that potentially, because of the experience coming into the season and the weapons that Alabama always has, that he was going to continue to be productive. But I don't think anybody saw him reeling off the season that he had. 4,500 yards, 41 touchdowns. And then the one thing that stands out to me, Matt, when I look at Mac Jones, and this is probably credit to Mac Jones and to Steve Sarkisian, but the efficiency that he threw the football. I don't have the stats right here listed, but I mean, the efficiency throughout the season was really incredible. Right. What's your take on Mac Jones? He didn't have to go down in the Senior Bowl. He went down there, had a great showing. I know he probably interviewed very well. He already has his master's degree. This guy has it going for him. Like you said, there's a lot of quarterbacks to choose from. What's the latest pulse on Mac Jones?
Yeah, I think the Senior Bowl helped him because, like you said, I mean, what he did over the course of the season at Alabama, it's out there. The tape's there over, a season and a quarter, basically, or a season and a third of play. But I think the Senior Bowl helped get him outside that system because I've said it myself. I've seen this guy throw to 4 first-rounders at wide receiver. I've seen him hand off to a first-rounder while being protected by potential first-rounder at left tackle and center and a second-rounder at guard. He's been protected in the system, and that's not his fault, right? But you want to get him out of that and see what he can do. I think the Senior Bowl was really good for him just to show the arm strength, making different types of throws, to show the mobility a little bit where, he really didn't have to scramble a whole lot at Alabama. And again, that's not his fault, and so being able to just take him outside that scheme and show what he could do. But most importantly, Kyle, was the energy, the chemistry, the leadership. Those are the things that really sell you on a quarterback. And that was what I was most impressed by because, at Alabama, you can get overshadowed a little bit by all the talent there. And so for him to show up and, because of COVID, I hadn't had a chance to see him play in person, actually. And so seeing him throw in person, but also seeing the way that he interacted with his teammates, whether that was, guys that he was with at Alabama or, being on a whole new team with whole new players, just watching him interact with those guys was super, super important. So I would say that, he will be a first-round pick. Where that is depends a lot on what happens with the veteran quarterback market of guys being traded, like a Carson Wentz, where he lands. Could definitely shake things up. But I know New England at 15 is going to be a popular destination. A lot of people connect those dots. I think the Colts are a popular one as well. Washington football team, the Chicago Bears. So there's a lot of teams between 15 and 21 I think Mac Jones fits in pretty well.
Now, let's stay on Mac Jones for just a second. It's it's going to be interesting to see what happens, just as you said, kind of with the trades and the other quarterbacks that are in the draft. When you look at this draft, people obviously know that Trevor Lawrence will be the first guy taken off the board. Then you have Justin Fields, potentially. A lot of people have been talking about Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, the quarterback out of North Dakota State, and then you have Mac Jones. My argument following Alabama football, and look, I'm not an Alabama homer, I cover Alabama football, but like the thought process for me, at least, is this: like, Mac Jones played at the highest level, right? SEC, he's gone against the best defenses. I mean, don't you think that would translate to maybe a little bit him jumping? I don't know about Justin Fields, but some of these other guys, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance. What's your take on that?
Well, I think with the NFL, so much of it comes back to traits, not necessarily production, and so with Mac Jones, comparing him to Trey Lance and Zach Wilson, he doesn't have the same level of arm strength. That's the biggest thing that shows up. Secondarily to that, the mobility, which is super important to the NFL right now. We see that every time you watch an NFL game, right? You're seeing these guys that have to be able to move around, whether it's designed or not. You have to be able to move around and at least move the pocket and extend plays. So I think that's where with Zach Wilson, what he was able to do as a downfield thrower, as a scrambler, that excites you. That's how the NFL is being played right now. And with the same with Trey Lance, we only got to see him play one game this year. So that in and of itself is a concern, that a smaller level of competition, and he, not through his fault, that schedule being canceled for North Dakota State. We only saw one game. And so they each of those players has their own concern. Everyone in this class does, other than Trevor Lawrence. You could poke some holes in Justin Fields as well. Definitely. And for Mac Jones, I think the thing that's maybe frustrating for Alabama fans is that the holes we poke in his game are that he was surrounded by elite competition, and that he doesn't have like awesome physical tools. And those are kind of weird things, right? A quarterback who's not super fast. Okay, well, he can throw the ball, and he's, like you said, he's efficient and he's accurate. He throws a beautiful deep ball. His anticipation's really, really on point. So there's a lot to like, and that's why he is a first-round quarterback. But I think it's important to remember that scouting is looking at what a player can do and trying to figure out where the shortcomings are, right? What can they not do? Yeah. What might they not be able to do as well at the next level? So, that's where Justin Fields is facing a lot of the same questions of, you were surrounded by almost NFL level talent at every position. So it's hard to take you out of that and see how you're going to thrive if you end up with the team, like the New England Patriots, who have no good wide receivers, and that'll be a big adjustment. I've said before, Mac Jones his wide receiver core at Alabama will be better than the one he has in the NFL. And that's crazy, right? And that's a good thing. That's a credit to Alabama and Nick Saban. But, he will never have four receivers in the NFL better than the ones he had in college. And I don't think you could say that about many guys other than him and Tua, the only two I can think of.
That's what I was just going to. Like Tua, you have Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, DeVonta Smith, and right. Jaylen Waddle at your disposal, all first-round guys. This has been interesting to talk about, and I appreciate your time. I want to go on one more offensive guy, and someone who has mobility, who has really all the makings to be, in my opinion, an every down back, Najee Harris. And like you said earlier, like, you can get overshadowed in this offense. How about these numbers? And we're not even, he didn't even make the Heisman finalists, which was pretty shocking, because you look at—
It's crazy.
I know. Yeah. Look, these stats are after the season, and I'll never understand why the Heisman isn't decided after the entire season. 1,400 yards rushing, 26 touchdowns. Stay with me. 43 receptions and 425 additional yards. I think he had like 4 additional touchdowns. So 30 touchdowns on the season, led Alabama in the point total. You look at his athleticism. You look at his size, 235 pounds. You saw him. Everybody talks about the hurdle, but I like to talk about his ability to catch the football, his ability to stay healthy. Running backs a grind. Everybody has a lifespan in the NFL, but let's talk about Najee Harris. And is he a first round type guy, considering just all the attributes that he brings to the table?
I think he is. I do. And you're right to point out the pass catching, because I think had he left after his junior year, which a lot of people were pushing for him to do, he would not have been a first round pick, because there were those questions about, can he catch the ball? How's he going to look a pass pro? Come back this year, and I think Coach Saban and Coach Sarkisian did a great job of saying, hey, we're going to feature you a little bit more, and it worked out. And now I think he's the best running back in the draft class when you put it all together. The inside-outside power, the speed, the hands, the ability in the open field to make people miss, and as you said, the health, the size, it's all there. I had the opportunity to meet him in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. He's also just a great individual, so you love that about it, of you know what you're getting in terms of the person as well as the player. And that's something you're never going to have to worry about him off the field. This is a good person. So teams are going to fall in love with that. And I think it's a crime that he wasn't a top 4 vote getter in the Heisman. I really thought before the SEC championship game, I would have voted for Najee Harris. Like, that would have been my vote for Heisman. I'm with you. They should wait until it's all said and done to vote for this thing. It's a shame they don't, but he's going to be a tremendous NFL player. And I think the conversation with him, he might be going to Miami to reunite with Tua. He might be going to Pittsburgh to, rock the 32 as the new Harris for the Steelers. But I do think he'll be a first-round pick.
Najee Harris. And it was funny. I just saw a recent interview. I don't know. It was somewhere on social media. It's like Marshawn Lynch was talking about him. He was like, yeah, he's from the soil, talking about the Bay Area. So I love it. Najee Harris, he just brings so much excitement. And like you said, it's such a great individual. Always love his sound bites because he just keeps it real. He doesn't have to put on this coach's speak. He just says it how it is. Always have great appreciation for his game. Here with Matt Miller, thedraftscout.com. Definitely check it out. Believe it or not, we're going to talk about some offensive linemen because, the linemen were the catalyst to this offense, but there was also an Alabama defense. And there's 2 guys that I want to ask you about, really 3 guys, but 2 that are kind of floating around in the first round of this, mock drafts. And the first is Patrick Surtain. This guy, his father played in the NFL. Apple doesn't fall far from the tree. What I personally like about Patrick Surtain is kind of his length. He played corner, and sometimes corners can be a little bit undersized in my opinion. And in today's world where you have to cover the fast guys, you have to cover the DK Metcalfs. You need these bigger type corners. Patrick Surtain played star. He played corner, 38 tackles, 1 interception, 12 pass breakups. Let's kind of dive into Patrick Surtain and get your take on him.
Yeah, I'm a gigantic fan of his. And, also you got to mention the NFL bloodlines. The fact that his dad was a really, really good NFL player too. I love it. And as you mentioned, the size is so important to what he brings to the table because to be, 6'2", 210, that's what you need. And I think, mentioning the versatility, he's not as fast as Jalen Ramsey, but you see some of the same things that Jalen did at Florida State, which gets you really excited about, okay, you have the size to be a man coverage player in the NFL. You have the ball skills. I mean, he did it all at Alabama. And so I think that's where with Surtain, he's in a conversation with Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech is who will be the first corner drafted. I think they both bring kind of a unique skill set, but for a player who everyone knew, like we've known since his freshman year how good this player was, and still teams went away from him and he still had the ball production that he did, so I think that's what's super exciting. I would say the floor for Patrick Surtain is probably 12 to 13 overall. That San Francisco, Los Angeles Chargers range is about where he should come off the board. But it also would not be a surprise if he's a top 10 pick, whether that's the Denver Broncos at 9, the Philadelphia Eagles at 6, depending on what they do with the wide receiver position. So he will not be waiting very long in round 1 to hear his name called.
Wow, Patrick Surtain. Yeah, I can't wait to see. I'm in a ton of respect for his game and craft and how he handles himself. And as you said, Pop's played in the league as well. Christian Barmore, redshirt sophomore that's entering the NFL draft. I mean, this guy, I loved him from the time that he came here just because of he was all business. He played with a very high motor. I felt he should have played a little bit more during the 2019 season when Alabama needed a little bit more of a pass rush. Alabama clearly utilized him this past season, 8 sacks, which led the team, 6 quarterback hurries. He plays angry. He might get a personal foul every now and then, but I mean, you want those type of alpha males, and I think his ceiling is very high. What's the latest on him? You feel that he could potentially slide in that later half of the first round?
Yeah, I think late first, early second is the range for him right now. I think the key with Barmore is for teams to be able to think creatively. This is not just your standard Alabama nose tackle. He can get after the quarterback. We saw it this past year. He's more like Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen than I think a lot of people are realizing at this point. So looking at what Tampa did in the Super Bowl with a guy like Vita Vea, Christian Barmore could be a very similar player where he can stack the run first, second down, but you don't have to take him off the field. He can actually get after the quarterback and help you in a lot of different personnel packages. So I'm a big fan of his. I think there's a competition right now for who the top defensive lineman in this class is. And there's not that one guy that's, okay, he's a lock top 10 pick. There's not a Quinnen Williams in this year's draft. So I think with Barmore, it wouldn't be a surprise to have him be the first D lineman off the board. The Las Vegas Raiders are a team that has a gigantic need in the middle. He could be a great fit there. But I also have heard from teams, there's some early round 2 talk on him just because he is a little bit raw. as a player, if he falls to early round 2, somebody's getting a steal, and that's just that will be fair to everybody else. But I'm with you. I think the maybe what's holding him back the most is the 1 year wonder hit on him right now of, okay, we only saw you really do it for a full season of pass rush, but this is where you would love to have a combine, because I think he would do exceptionally well there. But this is where the interviews and pro day and what the coaches at Alabama have to say about him will be huge in pushing his stock up a little bit.
Good stuff. A couple more guys to go through. I wanted to get your take on 3 Alabama offensive linemen. I really haven't. I've kind of seen some in the first round, and that's primarily Alex Leatherwood. But also want to get your take on Deonte Brown. You saw him at the Senior Bowl as well, and then also Landon Dickerson, who was down at the Senior Bowl, obviously with a knee injury. But let's kind of start with Alex Leatherwood, and just kind of keep in mind I'm asking you about Alex Leatherwood, Deonte Brown, and Landon Dickerson.
Yeah, I mean, what an exceptional offensive line. And I think with Alex Leatherwood, what impressed me most at the Senior Bowl was he moved better than I expected. Sometimes you watch a guy on tape and it's just different when you see them in person. So the movement there was really, really good. I think with Alex, we're talking late first, early second round, depending on where the run from tackles go. If Penny Sewell and Rashawn Slater are both top 10 picks and Christian Darrimore comes off, in the top 12 or 13, then Alex Leatherwood has a very big opportunity to be picked in the early 20s. Deonte Brown, obviously the guy became famous with the meme about the body type being perfect. He's a mauler, and for someone to be as big as he is just bulky as he is, to move so well is really impressive. I think, there's certain teams that are going to like Deonte better than others. If you're running a man blocking scheme, that's your guy, because just let him, move people out of the way with his size and his strength and the demeanor he plays with. Like that's easy for him. That's all day. So I do think he has a shot to be a round 2 pick. I think some of it will be as teams, again, dig into the scheme and figure out if he's a fit for them or not. The third guy that you mentioned, Landon Dickerson, I'm actually much higher on Landon Dickerson than a lot of people are, I believe. I have him as a late first round pick, and that's with the ACL injury. Like I understand he might miss some time as a rookie. He's still that good. The football IQ is exceptional. The ability to get to the second level and clear out linebackers is great. He can pull, he can trap. And in pass pro, I mean, he's so poised, so smart, and really reminds me of Ryan Kelly a lot, who was at Alabama back in the day. I don't like to make team-to-team comparisons, but maybe, just seeing that, the ability in the middle to anchor everything. And I think we even saw, not that they were hurting in the championship game, but, the line did look a little different without him out there. And you start to talk to coaches about how he plays and how he leads and how he interacts. Everyone loves him. Talk to NFL scouts who've been through Alabama over the past couple of years, absolutely love him. So I think, given the importance of the center position, given the talent in this class isn't really that great outside of Landon, I would not be surprised if he's picked at 31 overall, and a team like Kansas City says, "Hey, we know you might miss August, but we desperately need you to keep Patrick Mahomes safe. So come do that job."
Glad to hear you're so high on Landon Dickerson. I mean, he did an incredible job at Alabama. I think, Florida State felt when he committed to them that he was going to be this Landon Dickerson that we've seen at Alabama. I know he dealt with some injuries in Tallahassee, but since he's been at Alabama, played at the guard position as well, center, so very versatile offensive lineman. And I think you're right, certainly kind of underrated going into the NFL draft. Last guy I wanted to ask you about, Matt, is Dylan Moses. Dylan Moses kind of had an interesting season at Alabama. I think that he was coming off an injury, ACL that he missed the last season, then came back. Obviously, was never fully healthy. He has the intangibles. You think, he could, a couple of years ago, this guy's like a 4'4" guy, inside linebacker, very high IQ. If you get an opportunity to hear from him, you understand he's kind of the coach on the field. I know that he didn't have a lot of production this past season. What's your take on Dylan Moses as we close out?
Yeah, it's an interesting guy, because there was a whole thing last year about he kind of declared for the draft, then he didn't declare for the draft, and then he's going back to school. And, this year, early in the year, he looked sluggish. He was struggling to get outside the tackle box to make plays. I thought toward the end of the year, really watching the college football playoff was like, wait, where has this guy been? This is the player we've been waiting to see really for 2 years. And he finally got a chance to turn that on. So I think with Dylan, workouts are going to be huge. Showing the 40 time doesn't really matter for a linebacker. So we want to see 3-cone short shuttle. Look at the agility, the explosiveness, because to to be a middle linebacker at Alabama, there's almost a natural knock that happens. People are like, oh, you're just a thumper.
Yeah.
You're just a 3-4 thumper.
Yeah.
He has to show that athleticism. And unfortunately, like early in the year, I mean, that's what he looked like. He looked like a player who would really struggle in coverage. And especially against, tight ends and slot receivers, he wouldn't be able to do that. I did think toward the end of the year, he started to show a lot more burst, a lot more balance. And he did. He looked like the player I've been waiting to see. So where his draft range is, I think is probably round 2, round 3. It is a very good linebacker class. That is the other thing that could push him down a little bit. And, obviously interviews are going to be key, because that was, like when you talk about Dylan Moses to scouts, everybody brings up the decision to declare, then to withdraw, and the letter that got tweeted out and the whole thing. So, that's something where, interviews are going to be super important, because one thing that NFL teams do not want is a player who's being micromanaged. And I'm definitely not saying that's the case, but that is something that they have to, clear up and make sure people know that, hey, this is an independent individual we're drafting, and you're drafting the player, not the family.
All right. Good stuff, Matt. Everyone, you can follow Matt Miller on the draftscout.com, social media everywhere. Hey, Matt, we appreciate it, man. Was this fun for you? I mean, there's plenty of guys to talk about when you talk about the NFL draft, but when it comes to Alabama football, you can really dive into it. I mean, we spent, 30 minutes kind of cruising through a bunch of guys, and most of them are in the first round, which is pretty crazy.
Right. I've probably watched more Alabama football over the last 10 years than maybe anyone but an Alabama fan, because it's like every year there's 6 first-rounders you got to watch, and then there's 5 second-rounders you have to watch. So we'll definitely have to do this again next year, when we're talking about the next group that's coming through.
All right, great stuff. Well, thank you so much. Definitely, everybody, go check out Matt Miller, thedraftscout.com. We appreciate it, and we'll come to you next time right here on BamaInsider.com.